Welcome back to AP U.S. History. We're talking about Reconstruction, Chapter 17. We left off talking about Johnson being impeached. Things are going to come to a head with Congress, which are controlled by radical Republicans. They don't like Johnson. They think that he's too sympathetic to the South, and they're going to try to get rid of him. He removed Stanton, which went against the Tenure Act, which was for all reasons unconstitutional. He also replaced generals in the field that were too sympathetic to the radical Republicans in Congress. All of these things infuriate Congress, and eventually they vote to impeach him in February 24th. He is going to have charges brought against him. There's going to be an 11-week trial. Eventually, he's acquitted by one vote. But from that point on, he's really an ineffective president. Congress is running the show. The 13th Amendment is going to be passed, which abolishes slavery. And the South will have to accept this. They will also have to accept the 14th Amendment, which gives African Americans equal protection under the law. So they passed a Civil Rights Act in 1866. This makes it the law of the land. And the only way you could rescind it is to pass another amendment taking this away. Some of the provisions given under this amendment gave blacks citizenship but not the right to vote. It also reduced proportionally the representation of states that would deny the vote to blacks in electoral college. And it also rejected any Confederate debts. The 15th Amendment is passed in 1869. Its main purpose is to give adult African American males the right to vote. There were some problems with this bill. One, it said nothing about blacks holding political office, which they're going to be denied in the South after Reconstruction is over. Poll taxes requiring people to pay to vote. This is enforced against blacks but not whites in the South. Whites who can't read or write are not allowed to vote, but blacks aren't. And there was no mention of property requirements, which is going to be another reason that blacks are denied to vote. Women are going to be excluded from the right to vote in the 15th Amendment, which infuriates women voters, women activists. They'll have to wait until the 19th Amendment in order for them to get the right to vote in 1920. The Civil Rights Act bill was passed in 1866, same year as the 14th Amendment. It would aim to destroy black codes that denied certain rights to people, particularly serving on juries and testifying. It gave black citizenship. This is vetoed by Johnson but overturned by Congress. 1875 as another Civil Rights Act passed, which said that blacks would have the same access to public conveyance and places, theaters, restaurants, trains, so forth. You couldn't deny them access to these things. Prohibited discrimination in selection of juries, that blacks would be able to serve on juries. With both bills, the real problem is that it doesn't have an enforcement mechanism. And so even though these bills are supposed to protect African Americans, in fact, in reality, they don't. The military reconstruction, remember that Congress is going to put together a joint committee on this, and they're going to come up with bills to reintegrate the South and govern it. The South is going to be divided into 5 military districts run by generals. It disenfranchised, kept thousands of former Confederates from being part of the government. It required that they ratify in the South the 14th Amendment before they came back into the Union. And they also had to guarantee state constitutions protected the voting rights of blacks. It stopped short of giving freemen land or education at federal expense. We know that eventually the Freeman Bureau will expire in 1872. Uh, it restarted Reconstruction in the 10 southern states that refused to ratify the 14th Amendment. This shows the 5 districts, and eventually by 1877, Reconstruction will be over. By 1870, most of the Confederate states have adopted the 14th and 15th Amendment, and again by 1876, the whites dominate Southern politics in those 11 states that seceded from the Union. The Compromise of 1877 is going to end Reconstruction. And by the way, the secret word for this chapter is the Compromise of 1877, which ends Reconstruction. So Hayes and Tilden are going to be running against each other, and eventually Hayes will win. Some of the things that were of importance during this time and distracted Northerners were the corruption in Grant's administration. He's going to be the next president after Johnson. There was a lot of economic disorder, turmoil for about 6 years. There were Indian wars in the West, and there was concerns over Western expansion. The greenbacks they had printed during the Civil War, how were they going to be handled? Were they going to destroy those? Would war debts be paid in greenbacks or in gold? Certainly there's a regional balance of power during this time, but the Democrats are going to take their spot again. Tilden actually led the popular vote and led an electoral college, but there's hints of fraud in South Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, and Oregon, and eventually a commission awards 20 more electoral votes to Hayes. At this point, the Democrats in the Senate filibuster, they just start debating. There's a rule in the Senate that they can debate as long as they have the floor. Nothing happens. The Republicans in Congress, the Senate, decide that they need to work out a compromise. They want Hayes to be the president. The Democrats want Reconstruction to end, and so it will. And Hayes will become the president of the United States. Of course, the supporters in Tilden cry foul. They believe that he should be the president of the United States. And so Tilden, you can see in this cartoon, is running along Ruford Hayes, and he's crying because he didn't win the election. Alas, the woes of childhood, Sam Tilden, boo-hoo, and Hayes is going to become president. So the compromise ends Reconstruction. A couple of terms that you need to know. Scallywags were Southerners who sympathized in Northern policies. They condemned the Confederacy. They were looked down upon by the majority of Southern whites. And so they're going to be Northern sympathizers and rejected by their own people. Carpetbaggers, again, these are people that came from the North to help African Americans. Many of them consisted of soldiers, teachers, and businessmen, and they're going to acquire land in the South, and they're going to be eventually terrorized, along with scallywags, by the KKK. This organization was founded in 1866 in Tennessee by Bedford Forrest, who was an ex-Confederate general. He wants to end Reconstruction policies, and he certainly doesn't want to help African Americans. And so this is a domestic terrorist organization that intimidates people in the dark of night, and people are going to be killed. who stand in or whipped or beaten or burned out by the KKK. Uh, Congress reacts to the KKK by passing the Enforcement Act. It sent troops to try to deal with the KKK. It had some success, but eventually, when Reconstruction ends, the KKK is going to take a firm hold in the South, all the way up into the 20th century. In terms of reconstruction of civil rights, the 14th and 15th Amendments are pretty much ignored. Again, the Civil Rights and Enforcement Act, basically, some see it as a lost cause. Some of the reasons, some of the ways that they control blacks in the South is the poll tax and literacy test. It was unfairly administered by the whites. Booker T. Washington is a moderate African American who believes that segregation is wrong, but kind of accepts it and believes that gradually that politics will solve this if blacks pull themselves up. He establishes the Tuskegee Trade School. He believed that if blacks could educate themselves and become like good white folks, that segregation would end. W.E.B. Du Bois is the opposite side of the coin. He believes that segregation is wrong and he wants it stopped immediately. It's interesting to note that Booker T. Washington will die a broken man and believe that African Americans will never receive their rights in America. But African Americans will receive their rights in the 60s and 70s, and America will restore justice. But that's going to take about 100 years after the Civil War. Du Bois starts the Niagara Movement, which is a predecessor to the KKK, or to the NAACP. He believed in the talented 10th, and he believed that 10% of blacks immediately should be given full access to mainstream America. The NAACP was founded in 1910, and it's going to advance the rights of African Americans. And it was founded on the heels of the Niagara Movement. And they're going to use lawsuits in court to gain rights for blacks. And we're going to stop